There's a Washington Post story you might want to read.
Yeah, I have read it.
Did you see it?
I did.
About the Big Ten?
Yep, I did. So the story is the Big Ten took its email conversations about its decision-making process to a private server, which is sort of evading transparency.
Big Ten? Come on.
Now,
Yeah.
You may not like what I'm about to say. What I'm going to say is going to partially defend the Big Ten in this, and not defend Big Ten in the miniature, but not in the maximum. Big Ten leaders meet all the time. They met before COVID. They met in person. The media is not privy to those discussions in those meetings, right? Reporters hang out, in hotel lobbies waiting for a comment for a reason. Just like with the Big 12 meetings back in the day. You didn't get to sit in on the meetings. Media didn't know. Zoom calls are private too. Zoom is a private server. You're not going to see any stories from the Washington Post. It says the Big Ten conversations normally done in person on Zoom is an attempt to circumvent public records. If a Big Ten chancellor calls another Big Ten president to talk about whatever, cooking recipes, whatever you want to call it, we're not privy to that either. So there was very little transparency in the league to begin with. I think there is an argument to be made that there should be an email trail related to the decision-making process in the Big Ten. And one of our reporters, Henry Cordes, requested all information that was made part of the Big Ten process. And we got a lot of pointless emails, like just not pointless, but just like data dump of like, well, there's going to be a discussion today, or they're going to announce this, so on and so forth. They took it offline into a private server. The question becomes at that point, why is that wrong? Why is it wrong to go on to Slack? In this case, they went on to a private server that is run by NASDAQ. But why is it wrong to go on to Slack to have conversations about a decision-making process? So the Washington Post story begs the question of, okay, so they did that. And it is wrong because why is it wrong? Why are Zoom calls wrong? Why are Big Ten meetings where we got to sit out in the hotel lobby wrong? Why are they wrong?
Well, like it mentions in the story, part of the idea was they didn't want to start a lengthy reply all text or a lengthy reply all email chain, which as somebody who is part of those on occasion, I totally appreciate that. But when you look into it and you see that some of the intent is, hey, let's do it over here, so we're exempt from FOIA requests.
Yeah,
that's when it's wrong to me. When you're looking to.
So the intention of shielding the discussions is wrong.
When it comes to something involving public health and your public institution and making these kind of decisions, yeah, I think so.
So the Zoom calls that they've been on should be publicly available.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm just playing the principle out here because the Post story doesn't do that, and it's not going to do that. So the Zoom call should be available. Should we be able to sit in on the Big Ten president and chancellors meetings when they have them in Chicago or wherever?
I think when a decision is made, there just needs to be a record of how that decision was come to.
Okay.
So I don't think we should be able to sit in all these meetings, but if they make a decision that has that of the scope that they did last fall, postponing football, reversing course, playing it a season during a pandemic, how and why did they come to that decision?
Sure.
We had these same discussions with the player lawsuit last year, and that's what they were seeking. And I don't think we ever found an answer, because when the Big Ten restarted the season, the lawsuit was dropped and everyone moved on with their lives. So we never found an answer to that. But I think that's the point.
To be clear, I'm not defending the Big Ten's actions. I'm saying that, and I can be a pain in the rear when I do this. I'm playing out the implications that suggest that it's wrong for them to have used the NASDAQ supported server. And the implication is, well, then it's wrong for them to use Zoom too, that they should be using university university equipment and university servers that we can then go back as media and watch the entire meetings. By the way, that has happened. If anybody recalls, does anyone recall the school board meeting in the state of Pennsylvania that was done, I don't know, sometime in the summer? That was a full recorded meeting of 3 hours long, and they talked to the Penn State doctor, and the Penn State doctor quoted statistics about myocarditis that were completely wrong. And then everybody reported. And as a result, was a story that was lingering out there for, I don't know, several days, only for him to come back and correct himself. That's an example of a meeting that was completely public. That is an example of a meeting that was completely public. It was a school board meeting, and it was online, a 4.5-hour meeting for people to watch on YouTube. And of course, I covered that story as well. We printed something that was wrong. I mean, we didn't know it was, but the guy gave information that was wrong, and then that was disseminated across many stories.
But because it was made public, was that did that help in part then?
Yes.
Help come to the realization that it was false?
Yes.
I mean, I think there's some value in that. Yeah.
I'm just saying that there's an implication to these kinds of stories that we have to be thoughtful about, because I think the presumption is the Big Ten did this, and this back in the fall. This is true. The Big Ten's optics looked really bad. Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren was not able to adequately explain why they made the decisions they made when he was asked very straightforward questions by Dave Revson of the BTN. Now, I was always impressed with Revson's questions, and Warren didn't handle that very well. Nobody is doubting that. Also, we know that Warren had siloed the presidents and the chancellors away from the athletic directors, which is something we learned after the fact. I'm just saying that when you get the kind of total transparency that we're talking about, it has a way of shaping the decisions in just consequential ways. I can understand why the Big Ten presidents and chancellors did not want to have, discussions and debates over an email chain that then they had to turn over to the media later. Just like I understand why they would have a Zoom call as opposed to a publicly broadcasted meeting over university channels.
Sam,
I get that.
Sam, this is the Big Ten. They're their own worst enemy. We don't care about these horrible, boring Big Ten meetings. All these fuddy-duddies and their bow ties making these decisions with their arrogance. The average fan doesn't care or doesn't want to know about all that stuff.
They don't. That's right.
But the Big Ten caused its own crisis. There's a public trust crisis in that leadership. Whoever the leadership is, CEOs, Kevin Warren, probably not. But I'm saying if they had just come out at the very beginning and been upfront and had a lot more transparency, or any transparency would have been at least some, then nobody would care about this. But now going forward,
that's a great point.
People are wondering, okay, what are you hiding from us? Because you've been hiding from us the whole time.
Right.
And you never explain your decisions because you have no PR sense or any of that stuff. So this is their fault. Generally, people don't want to know this stuff. I've covered conference meetings, and you're in the hallway, and they come out, and a spokesman says nothing, and then you go right. You go talk to coaches, and you go right, and you go home. Nobody cares about this stuff. They want to know about wins and losses and who's on the hot seat. But they care about this because they feel like they got it got ramroded. It was just sort of okay, you guys are trying to hide stuff, so now we're interested. So it's their fault. And can they change it? Well, I don't think the people in place are there to change it. So
I think you and Evan both make really, really good points. The fact that the decision was an incredible magnitude, the way that the Big Ten handled it, the decision to initially postpone and then to re-engage football, one, and then two, the idea that the Big Ten presented this this, I don't know if image is the right word, but this sort of front of a lack of transparency, that they were going to try to do the best they could to sort of soft pedal the answer and then hope that everybody agreed with it. And then they didn't agree with it. And a lot of players had a problem with it. And then they had to go back to the table. I think it's entirely possible that a lot of the Big Ten presidents and chancellors in a once in a lifetime moment had a presumption that the Big Ten was a lot closer to the Ivy League than it is to the SEC. And here's the thing. If not for Ohio State football, I think it might be.
No,
the reality is Ohio State brought him back to the table. Ohio State changed this conversation.
Well,
Nebraska helped with that. Nebraska suing the league helped with that. Don't get me wrong. It was part of the issue. But Ohio State saying we have a chance to win a national championship and we have a Heisman Trophy contender, that school has pushed the Big Ten more toward, hey, we've got to find a blend here. We can't do the Ivy League approach. We've got to find a blend. And that is, I would say that blend is harder for the Big Ten than every other Power 5 league, because I've tried to pay attention to what's going on some of these campuses as it relates to COVID and other issues. And it's just not easy. And I'm not trying to say that I agree with some of the decisions the Big Ten made. I think I have grace, and I'm trying to have grace and understanding for the viewpoint at the University of Michigan, which is very different than the viewpoint at the University of Nebraska. It's just hard.